kind of questions, though, I got to say 904 Hurricane. Can anybody lose to anybody? Pretty much about 80% of the teams in the country can lose to the other 80%. So any concerns Miami's going to lose to Louisville? Sure, Louisville's talented. They're good. Could they lose to FSU? Yeah, they could lose to Clemson.
I mean,
yes.
Yeah, what Mark is saying, you could – this is where we're playing the what-if game. And this is, when I was a teacher and I would say things, sometimes if we're doing a bomb drill or a shooter drill, I'm saying, don't move at all. And you get that one kid who's like, well, but if I'm breathing, my diaphragm is sympathetically. You know what I mean? So you can put these other kind of scenarios and things together. So hypothetically, could hypothetically Miami lose to Louisville 2 games in, lose to FSU game 3, and then lose to Clemson game 4? Hypothetically, that could happen as a mental exercise. Would that have the season probably fall apart? It wouldn't be great. Do I expect that series of events to happen? No, I don't. But is it in the realm of possibilities, like one of the, multiverse or multi-universe options for things that could happen? Yes, that is a thing that could happen. I just don't think it will.
I've been going through the SEC, and I post on the big board the schedule, and I put up the FPI probability for the percentage odds of winning that particular game as projected by them. I gave my own projection before I was influenced by the FPI. So then I've got my number there, which typically comes pretty close to the FPI, and basically state, look at this team. Team A has 5 games in which they're going to be favored. As it stands right now, things could change, obviously, leading into game week if it's the 9th game of the season. But as things stand right now, this team A is supposed to win 5 and supposed to lose 5. Could they be a 7-3 team? Yeah, pretty easily. They could be 7-3. Things could come unraveled a little bit. They could be 3-7, and they could be still pretty close to that 5-5 team. Yeah, it's close. And if you look at this, for better or worse,
it depends on the way that things break. Right. And I said this about Flanagan High School back years ago, before Devin Bush Sr. went there as a coach, before they started, just recruiting over all the guys that ended up winning a state championship for that team that had been moribund for the entire existence of that school. But years ago, when they had Justin Ferguson, who went to Notre Dame as a wide receiver, transitioned to linebacker, I said that was the best 5-5 high school team in America, because Miramar beat them by 6. And this is a Miramar team that I think went to a state championship game or won a state championship that year. They lost to another couple, or Cypress Bay went to the 3rd round or 2nd round of the playoffs that year. They lost to another couple out of district teams that ended up going deep into the state series for whatever classification. So, a couple of plays break a different way for that team. They're 7-3, 8-2 heading into the playoffs as a high school squad. And so I say that to say similar things can happen at this level, a couple of breaks here and there. Look, so I went to Miami. I'm blogging, broadcasting, everything about Miami. So let's talk about Miami. Think about last season, 6-7. How many plays have to go differently for that 6 to be a 9? Not many. You know what I mean? The margins are thin. Think about that Florida game. Sure, we lost. Things could have, but just looking at the result, what if 3 plays went differently that game? What if 4th and 17 singularly went different in the North Carolina game? What about you could literally put together 8 plays, and then that 6-win season turns to a 9 or 10-win season. So this is what we're talking about, that the margins are so thin that, it could be this and it could be that, but it's not a far distance of difference in a lot of these. Okay, because if you're getting blown out 73-3 every week, if you're in New Mexico State or whatever, you're okay. There's light years of distance between where you are and where you need to be. But even if you want to focus on Miami, from where we were and where we wanted to be, close, bro.
And the same could be said for a lot of teams in the country. But I do think that Miami's a classic example of them. They're at the nth degree. What they performed last year was at the nth degree of that. Definitely. The other thing about this is funny because I'm making predictions right now, game by game, with all these various teams. So I'm reminding people that 20 to 25% of these games are upsets. I'm also reminding people, as I looked at the previous 3 years, Cam, top 10 teams in the nation. So we've got a small elite, and they basically don't lose any games. And if they lose a game, it's typically to another elite. Then you've got all these teams that are going 10-2, 9-3. And I'm looking at the top 10 teams as the AP has determined by the end of the season. And I'm letting people know who are bashing me for picking some upsets, because how could they lose to them? How could they lose to them? Look at the top 10 teams in the nation in the 2 and 3 games that they're losing. I'll just take one example, but there's a zillion over just the last 3 years. Georgia, they played 4 top 10 teams last year. They beat all of them. They lost to 4-8 South Carolina. Ohio State, 2 consecutive years, was beating 4 and 5 ranked teams and losing to Purdue and Iowa. I've got a zillion examples like that. Wisconsin beat a couple top 10 teams and a number of ranked teams last year. Who'd they lose to? A 7-loss Illinois team. On and on and on and on. Right. And people that are crucifying me for saying, how could they possibly lose to them? And they're not big stretches that I'm making. I'm not saying Florida's losing to Vanderbilt.
Which almost happened twice recently, by the way. You know what I mean?
They were down like 2 scores in the second half last year.
Right. Hello. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that crazy. I mean, but yeah, I mean, there's going to be some upsets. There's going to be those kind of things that happen. So, hopefully you can just have that consistent professional level of performance, and obviously you got guys who are 18 to 22. So the variance is probably going to be high because just like that's a still developmental age. Like, yeah, you want to have everybody who's older, more seasoned, more veteran, and able to just consistently perform at that level. But look, it even happened to Alabama with the worst loss in Nick Saban's tenure in a national championship game. It happens to everybody, but you got to try to avoid those things. And hopefully, with Miami, with this, improved roster, upgraded coaching staff on the offensive side, the upgraded scheme, which is going to use the talent on the roster to great success, hopefully. And having De'Aaron King, because, like Manny Diaz says, there's 2 plays every time that Miami snaps the ball. There's the play that they call, and there's the play that De'Aaron King can make happen when things break down. And we, have said it a lot of times, and we've seen it on the other side. Miami lost to Florida State a couple of times because they had Dalvin Cook and we didn't. And I want to hopefully see that, regardless of the situation and circumstance, Miami has De'Aaron King and the other team doesn't. And I want it, and hopefully that will be a thing that will propel Miami to win in spots where, maybe in the recent past and even last year, they lost.
And let's look at the conference. We've talked many times about the conference in regards to the tiers of talent, but disregard the talent for a second. Just look at the performance on the field and the results on the field. For the last 5 years since Florida State fell off from being able to challenge Clemson, it's been Clemson, and then there's a couple really bad teams. But they haven't even been consistent. It's not like it's been Syracuse every year. They were 10-3 2 years ago. That's even alternated. Georgia Tech was the bad team last year, but they haven't been the bad team before. So even the very worst has cycled through whomever it's been that season. And it was NC State. NC State's been an 8 or 9 win program for the last 5 or 6 years, but they went 1-7 in the conference last year. But basically, you've had this glut of 7-5 teams. And even though Miami's so much better talent-wise than Wake Forest has been performing well. They're really good. They develop players, and the coaching's good. Dave Clawson does a hell of a job, and they're going 8-4, 7-5 every year somehow. But the conference has basically just been stacked with 7-5 teams.
I mean, that's a byproduct of that, 4-4 coastal madness, or 5-3, that's been going on for a long time. But no, you're right about that.